Hi everyone, I thought I'd give you some reasons tonight to be optimistic as an environmentalist. Now, first start off with a slightly negative question. Who sees this as sort of the future? Yeah? A few of you, okay. So we've got some optimists in the house, which is good. I've often seen, people often use an excuse, probably not us, but climate change deniers often say, well, it's all China. We can't do anything about climate change because of China, even though they're the ones making most of our stuff. We've exported our emissions there. It's like an excuse. Sometimes when you meet communists, I saw some communists giving out a leaflet, and the leaflet was not printed on recycled paper, and I said, well, you're destroying the world's forests with this leaflet. And they said, well, no, when the communist revolution happens, via this leaflet, then we'll have environmental sustainability. And of course, religious people, some people say, oh, you've got to wait for Jesus to come back before we can do anything. And I just don't think this is the case, and I've got a lot of evidence for that. We have achieved a lot as environmentalists. The world is a greener place to a great extent, and there's some great examples of this, and that's why we should be optimistic and see optimism. So, the sort of theory is, and I'll tell you a bit about me. So my company makes environmentally friendly bike products, essentially oil-free lubricants with recycled packaging, and it's in the bicycle industry. So I saw a problem and came up with a solution. I also run Green Drinks London, which is every second Tuesday of the month in London Bridge. It's a smaller version of this. So if you look at the past and the future and the present, that's kind of how we can look at these things and why we should be optimistic. Does anyone recognise the picture on the left there? Does anyone know what's going on there? Hands up. So this was one of the early Greenpeace campaigns, not that long ago. I think it was the 60s or the 70s. It was acceptable to throw barrels of nuclear waste into the ocean off a ship. That was how we disposed of nuclear waste. And you might have seen videos of people just driving London buses into the sea to get rid of them. So that is how far we've come. That would be completely unacceptable now. Whatever you think of nuclear power, you would not chuck it in a barrel in a sea. So that's a reason to be hopeful. That's something we've achieved, something that Greenpeace, to its credit, has done. Does anyone remember like leaded petrol or 4-star petrol? Yeah, really bad. I mean, air pollution is still an issue, but way worse when you had leaded petrol, really harmful. And essentially, that's been phased out. So the theory is you have scientists who come up with the problem, or they see the problem. Then you have NGOs like Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, who kind of raise awareness about the problem, and books and social media do the same thing. Then you have inventors who come up with a solution to that problem. And then those inventors and entrepreneurs create a product, and then you have ethical consumers who then buy that product. First, the very, very rich ones, then it becomes the sort of third of people who are kind of good people and the product's a similar price. And then eventually it becomes law. So with leaded petrol, it's probably altruistic people buying cars that had unleaded petrol, very, very expensive. Gradually the price came down, then it became basically normal to buy unleaded petrol, and then the government passed a law banning unleaded petrol. And this seems to be the pattern, and it's a very optimistic thing. We don't need to overthrow whole systems or anything to achieve these, at least some of these gains anyway. And that's a good thing. Does anyone know what the percentage of renewable energy is in the UK now? Yeah. 51, yeah. I've actually got 41 from the National Grid from a year ago. It was 2% in 1990, 2% renewable energy. Now it's 41%. And if you add nuclear to that, controversially, then it'd be over 50% low carbon energy, which is a huge achievement in what is that, 30 years. That's something to be really thankful for, right? Has everyone been watching Love Island at the moment? Probably, no, I've seen 1 or 2 episodes. But there's a big sign on the wall. It says, "We love pre-loved." So an eBay advertising, "Oh, we love pre-loved clothing." It's becoming more of a culturally acceptable thing. I was kind of the weird guy that went to charity shops and found clothing in the street and washed it and restored it. That's now becoming a bit more normal, which is great. So here is an early campaign. So I remember Keep Britain, I went to university over about 15 years ago now. There's a guy from another country, and he said, "Oh, how's the environment thing in your country?" And he said, "Oh, well, we're at the first step. We're just trying to stop people just chucking their packet of crisps or whatever in the street." So, it wasn't that long ago, it was kind of socially acceptable to litter, and this was a grassroots campaign, and eventually laws were passed. Actually, the first laws were passed in the 50s, but you get more laws and more of a cultural change. Fortunately, a lot of people that smoke still drop their cigarette butts, but even that is now not happening so much. It's important to remember that the environment isn't just about climate change. That is very important, climate change, but there are way more issues than that, and lots of these are being solved really progressively. Has anyone heard the story of the Greenpeace fridge? It's an interesting one, and it encompasses all of those things. Has anyone heard of the scientist called James Lovelock? So he's a great climate scientist, a bit of a polymath. He was sort of paid to work in a government laboratory, kind of do what he wanted. He did a lot of kind of space travel kind of gadgets. He created the machine that discovered the hole in the ozone layer, and that was causing people to have skin cancer and other problems as well. The hole in the ozone layer, he discovered that. And has anyone heard of Thomas? Oh yeah, he's also a climate scientist, right? James Lovelock. He died a year or two ago, and he wrote The Revenge of Gaia and lots of interesting books, and raised awareness on the topic, and was almost an activist as well. Has anyone heard of the scientist called Thomas Midgley? So he was like the opposite of James Lovelock. So he actually invented leaded petrol. And so whilst James Lovelock saw that there's a problem with chlorofluorocarbons damaging the ozone layer, Thomas Midgley invented and mass-produced this harmful additive to petrol to stop engine knocking. There were numerous alternatives which could have been used. He knew it was harmful to his own health. He actually poured product on his hands on television in the 50s or 60s to say, no, this is completely safe, just to stay rich. And he would regularly have to go on holiday because of the fumes from this terrible product that he made. Whereas James Lovelock saw the problem and came up with a solution and lobbied for it. So with the Greenpeace fridge, the problem was chlorofluorocarbons discovered by James Lovelock. And of course in aerosol cans it's the same issue. So then there was the kind of entrepreneurial stage. Lots of the fridge manufacturers essentially said, well, no, it's not really a problem, like they do with lobbying, like with smoking, like with climate change, to muddy the water, confuse people. Plus, we need refrigerators, and that kind of has a point. So Greenpeace commissioned the manufacture of a fridge which did not need CFCs, which would not harm the ozone layer. They manufactured its production, a prototype, and then they open sourced their patents so that any fridge manufacturer could make this product. So of course it started with the kind of green, ultra rich, maybe that 1 or 2% who were like, yeah, I will pay like 3 times the price for an eco-friendly fridge. And then it became more mass produced, and then basically a third of all fridges became, someone's doing a campaign on the sound of ambulances. They are deafeningly loud, and it puts cyclists off. So scientists found the problem, entrepreneurs / NGOs created the solution in the CFC-free fridge. A minority of rich people kind of bought it, and then the majority bought it, and then the government passed laws banning CFCs in fridge manufacturing. And the same happened with aerosol cans. So that's an example. Well, the ozone layer is actually healing, and there's proof of that, and that's because of scientists, then activists, and consumers, and ethical consumers. So that's really something to be celebrated, I think. And it's a story that's not told often. Does everyone remember plastic bags? Wow, I used to work in a shop as a student. I used to kind of annoy my employers. You'd get these people buying 1 can of cola and they'd want a plastic bag, and then they would chuck the plastic bag on the floor in the bin outside and then drink the drink. It was completely absurd. Again, scientists, I read in a book, scientists obviously raised awareness about the problem of microplastics, or more recently, but the problem of plastic in landfill. And then I read a book called Go Mad, 365 Ways to Save the Planet, really great book. And that kind of said, well, plastic bags aren't good. I started to reuse bags myself, and that was I was probably in the 1 or 2%, probably like yourselves with some of these green issues. And then got my student union shop to introduce the plastic bag tax, and then fast forward 5-10 years, the majority then started to use cotton bags. A previous environment minister said, a Conservative environment minister, I think in Margaret Thatcher's time or a bit after, said, we couldn't possibly have a plastic bag tax because we'd get berated by the press. But the point about ethical consumerism is enough people do it, a third of people using cotton bags, and then the government can pass a law. So now we have a plastic bag tax, and that started from people like you and me. So this is, I was going to do an example about cycling and how that's grown massively. And of course now it's a bit weird if you don't have a bicycle in London, and that's a big change from a few years ago. Again, scientists discovered and have told us about the problem of transport emissions. That's an image from Climate Camp a few years ago. And then electric cars. This is really something to be celebrated. Before Tesla, electric cars like less than 1%, probably your local milk floats. And now it's, does anyone know the figure of electric car sales now? It is actually over 22%, and that is helping with local air pollution. Elon Musk, whatever you think of him, he actually took the Tesla patents and then said, no, they're open source now. Anyone can copy Tesla patents, and that's why you have this proliferation of electric cars that are not just Teslas. So now it's becoming a mass market product. Started off with the original kind of Kickstarter, people pre-ordering a Tesla, and then it became sort of luxury car drivers, and now the majority, that sort of ethical consumer majority, are buying electric cars. And statistically, people are good. We are social animals. According to Mintel, the vast majority of people will buy the green and ethical product if it kind of performs the same and it's a similar price to the less ethical product. So there's some figures of electric car sales, and I think this is something to be celebrated. Yeah, we should be cycling more, we need more public transport, but whilst you do need ambulances and people to get around, they are part of the solution. Did you know the world has more trees now? According to the World Economic Forum, the figure's 130.6 million hectares of extra trees since the year 2000. Does everyone know that? Like the palm oil and deforestation, this is still a big issue, but there are now more trees. And that started with activists planting their own trees. Everyone remember the movement called Reclaim the Streets? Yeah, so people would dig up the road as an anti-road protest and plant a tree in the road. And then of course you have organisations like the Woodland Trust organising tree planting, and then that gets matched by councils who then, we're going to plant some trees. And now the British government went from 10 years ago saying we're going to sell off our woodlands that are owned by the Forestry Commission. We're going to sell them off. That got stopped, and now they're like, actually we're going to plant more trees, and we have tree planting targets. This is quite a nice illustration. Does anyone know, essentially deforestation happens in other countries. It ends up in UK and European gift shops. So make sure that when you're buying wood products, it has the FSC logo. This is increasingly recognised by most people. I think they should put it in the Bible, really. I mean, like, thou shalt not buy non-FSC wood, because you are, ruining God's creation if you're not doing that. That's my invention, which is made of FSC wood. Again, the problem with microplastics. So my company was the first in the UK to make a bottle from 100% recycled plastic. Packaging manufacturers were not interested. Found one that was, introduced it to the market. So again, scientists coming up with the problem, as an entrepreneur came up with the solution, ethical consumers buying that product, and we're getting towards closed loop recycling. And eventually that has now become a law. This is called the packaging tax. I personally lobbied for this. So with cardboard boxes, they have to contain a certain percentage of recycled cardboard in law, and there's no reason why you couldn't do that with plastic. So now if you're making plastic bottles, you have to pay a tax if they do not contain recycled plastic. Now, the percentage of recycled plastic it has to be, and the level of the tax do need to be tweaked to make this effective. But entrepreneurs like myself and then Instant Smoothies showing it's possible, and then people buying the products, then the government goes, actually, we won't get trashed by the Daily Mail if we introduce a packaging tax, and they did. And that's really something to be celebrated. And then the next step is prevented ocean plastics, which is what my company's doing. So litter picks in countries where communities, largely they've been flooded by companies like Dove, who are selling them shampoo bottles and stuff without the recycling and waste streams available. Prevented Ocean Plastics sets up these recycling schemes so they get paid for cleaning up litter, which would otherwise end up in rivers and then the oceans. So it'd be great to see this in more consumer products. A little bit on the problem of PTFE and petrochemicals. Another thing my company has helped solve. This guy, Billy Bucky, has anyone seen him before? Yeah, he lived near the DuPont plant in America. So Teflon, also known as PTFE, which covers pans. It's kind of safe, it's kind of environmentally inert. Well, asbestos is fine, it causes cancer when it's produced, and when it's destroyed at the end of its life. But in the middle bit, asbestos is kind of okay. Same with PTFE, it's been used in bike lubricants, frying pans, and at normal frying pan temperature uses, it will release PFOA, a carcinogen, and I personally believe we will see the end of this cancer pandemic, which we are in, with a number of tweaks, including the removal of Teflon, and it's already happening. My company is very vocal about removing PTFE from bike lubricants and other lubricants. Other companies like Green Pan, you know, they created this ceramic pan that didn't need Teflon but was still non-stick. Ethical consumers bought it and then becomes mainstream, and 3M, the manufacturer, under duress has said they're going to stop making PTFE. One of my competitors that I essentially bullied in a video called GT85, famous for containing PTFE, they phased out PTFE 3 months later after that video I made. So consumer action really works, and a lot of these problems are being solved. And again, the problem of petrochemicals in lubricants, another thing my company Green Oil solved. You can use plant-based and biodegradable alternatives to oil, and they're sustainable. Of course, everything used on a bike ends up in the environment, and the same applies to sun cream and other chemicals. Unless you're like operating in a petrol station where the oil is filtered, you know, most things do end up in the environment, and that's why we should be ethical consumers. So that pretty much concludes my talk, although I might have one golden nugget which I've forgotten. Oh yeah, there's the reference for the, it's the World Resources Institute for the number of trees that's grown in the world, and the World Economic Forum is also. I was told to include a reference and I forgot to include it in the slide. So other things I mean, veganism and vegetarianism, that's grown massively. I remember it's like a niche thing buying soy milk when I was a student. Now it's like, basically like people my age and younger, like milk is not cow milk, it's actually like oat milk, right? Kind of cow milk's the weird one, like what, you get a cow pregnant and what, really? So that's another thing, but eco-friendly paints. If you buy white paint in a normal paint shop, it is now eco-friendly paint. The chemicals leached by paints 10 years ago caused cancer. So that is another issue which has been solved and we should be hugely grateful for. And there's the thing that Gandhi said, which is, will be the change you want to see. And I think a lot of us here have been that change, and we are now seeing the change having happened. So thank you very much. That concludes the talk. I hope you're more optimistic. Thank you.
Any question for Simon? You are so.
Thank you so much. That was super interesting. First of all, just like a intersect question before I go in. Teflon is a carcinogen? Teflon coating pans?
The chemicals which are produced in its manufacture, so PFOA, that's carcinogenic, and PFOA is also released if it breaks down, often by heat. So yeah, the carcinogen is within Teflon and it's released in high temperatures.
So when cooking, if you use something that will break down the surface, it would release the carcinogen?
Exactly, yeah. In fact, if you use a Teflon frying pan at slightly too high temperature, which is very easy to do, it releases PFOA, and if you breathe that in, it's carcinogenic. You won't definitely get cancer, but it releases a carcinogen. Yeah, it's called PFOA, which is polyfluoronic acid. That's the chemical released by Teflon. Yeah.
I'll be throwing a lot of pans away.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, good plan. Wow. That's my first time hearing. Other than that, I thought that was really positive. I felt very enthused when you were speaking then. I felt like it really galvanised the position that I feel I'm in now, like being one of many people doing stuff. Why do you think that those narratives don't make it to the mainstream news when ultimately it has such a profound effect on humans emotionally? What do you think causes those kind of narratives to be held behind the scenes?
I think it's a few things. I think if you see a newspaper saying there's a hurricane coming, you're going to buy that newspaper. If you see a newspaper heading and it's like, oh, everything's kind of okay, someone bought a cat, you're going to, okay, it's all good, I won't buy it. So people do they're more alert to things that might be a threat. So that's kind of not the fault of the media, but I think that's one thing. I think NGOs should be a bit more active in their achievements. A lot of this stuff gets archived. I guess every new NGO CEO wants to make a name for themselves in the new campaign, and the stuff in the past gets forgotten. That's a bad habit of NGOs, unfortunately, and that's something that can be easily changed. Yeah, I think it's very easy as well for movements, from religions to political ideologies, to say, well, everything's rubbish, vote for us or give us money, we're going to solve everything. which is fair enough a lot of the time, but they're not going to go, oh, we've achieved all of this. And by the way, anyone who's working for an NGO, I was going to say it's very disappointing no one's really lobbied for a bottle deposit scheme, which was mentioned earlier. We have it in Spain, Germany, Austria. Why do we not have bottle deposit schemes in the UK? I mean, it's absolutely appalling. And why hasn't Greenpeace or Friends of the Earth done a campaign on that? It'd be an easy win, because politicians would know they won't get destroyed by the Daily Mail for doing that, because we all want bottle deposit schemes back.
I think you've got to not underestimate the power of the lobbying companies. They work very, very hard to stop the sugar tax, salt tax. They don't want to do it. They don't want returnable bottles. And the oil companies invest literally trillions or billions in campaigning for the production of fuel. That's what we're up against. The power actually is come from this room. If we wait for governments, we'll all be dead. It's people like you that see us a problem and do something about it. It's people like this lady here that see a problem and don't wait for permission, don't ask for permission, do it and let them try and stop it.
Thank you. And I saw a talk by an MP, and he said the number of people that actually write a letter to their MP is tiny. So if they get 5 letters on one environmental issue, that's actually really significant. Don't email, because they get loads of emails, but if you make the effort to buy a stamp and write a letter, that really has an impact. I learned that from an Amnesty International group and then seeing an MP. So.
Thank you, that was great. I appreciate your talk because you did provide a lot of evidence of all the great work that people have been doing for decades now towards, helping address climate change and pollution and everything. I think for me, a source of pessimism comes from the fact that there are more and more and more ways that I'm finding out that we're hurting the environment. So with CFCs, hurting the ozone, or with farming, nitrogen fertilizers, or hormones in animals, or monocultures, or even using AI now, the energy that's required for also storage of data and everything. It feels like we are making steps forward, but also as new technologies are being developed, or new chemicals are being developed, or new products, I don't know how, it feels like it's so difficult to address all of the ways, because we don't know all of the ways that we're harming the planet as things are being developed. So for me, that's a point of pessimism, and I'm wondering if you have any ways to, comment on that.
I think one is legislation at the European level, which is then part of a system called the globally harmonised system of classification for chemicals. So any new chemical has to have a full data sheet which says if it's toxic to the environment or not. That wasn't the case about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So that's the REACH legislation. So in theory, a new chemical has to be tested to make sure it's not carcinogenic. So the Teflon thing. Oh, by the way, asbestos, how long it took to ban that? So it was in the 1930s, someone discovered, it's actually a female scientist, as I understand it, got their name somewhere. But anyway, Dr. Merriweather discovered that asbestos is carcinogenic. It's only in 1999 it was banned. So we're now quick at banning stuff that's harmful. So on chemicals we are safer. I think there is a bigger media space, and the NGOs are more active in thinking about these issues. I know the data center thing with AI is quite scary in terms of wiping out climate change targets, but I wonder if it's not as bad as they say. And secondly, a lot of those companies are looking to use either nuclear or renewable power. One perhaps controversial thing is there are these small modular nuclear reactors that Rolls-Royce wants to develop. They're about £1 million each. One data center could have one of those, and that would power the whole thing, rather than draining our resources. But I think it's good that we're knowing about this stuff. It took a long time to link smoking to being carcinogenic, for example. Whereas data like AI is a year and a half ago it really got big, if that. And now already people are saying, well, this is potentially an issue. So it's a dilemma, isn't it? But a lot of people say, yeah, it's going to save the world. A lot of people are like, well, it's going to destroy the world. So yeah, we're thinking, what if you type into AI, how do I solve climate change? It's going to burn carbon to come up with an answer, I guess. But yeah, again, renewable energy has gone up from 2% to 42% in the UK. So there's no reason why, and a lot of that's through the private sector as well. So Ecotricity, Vince Dale, you've probably seen him on the news. He's a big Labour supporter, and he created his own wind turbines and turned that into a very profitable company. And then ethical consumers signing up to Ecotricity and similar renewable energy companies, that has funded the creation of lots and lots of wind turbines. Whereas the government, it's, you know, it can be difficult for them with budget restraints, they're not sure people are on board, whereas these private companies, it's really worked well. And then of course the government goes on board and does even more.
Any other questions?
Hi. It's more on the company side. So what you explained the circle at the beginning. So very rich people start buying it, and then it gets mass market, and when it gets mass market, then there's opportunity for other people to get there. But it takes like years for this to happen. So how can a company that wants to change the world really can survive while waiting for the mass market?
That's a good question. I guess by making the product expensive so that rich people buy it and it's luxurious. I mean, that is one way. And that's what happened with Tesla. It was essentially a luxury product before electric cars went mass market. I think the second way is like get government subsidies. And that has happened in other areas. I can't think right now. Yeah, so government subsidies, or make it a luxury product, or just get rich people to kind of put their money into it to make it happen. Like, I don't believe that there's a lot of targeting against billionaires at the moment, and it's a shame in a way, because I think they're the ones with the money, and we are humans. A lot of them do have a religious faith, and actually they should be using their money for good. And lots of them are. There's a great organisation called Survival International, and they are about Indigenous people not losing their rainforest homes. And I just think, why don't they go to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and just ask them for like $1 billion? How much does it cost to buy rainforest in Brazil? It can't be that expensive. Like they're selling it to like cow farmers for like how much a hectare? Like just get £1 billion from them, buy the Amazon rainforest, put it in a trust fund for like the people that live there, and then it's like the job done, right? I think we need more solutions like that. But yeah, it's a combination of encouraging governments to support things. I mean, in a perfect world, perhaps you'd have the kind of government skunk works of like new innovative eco products. Maybe we should encourage big corporations like Dyson and other organisations to have environmental skunk works, perhaps, where you, like James Lovelock when he worked for the government, just give scientists the role of coming up with solutions. Yeah, and I guess like the investment world, like the Dragon's Den, those investment houses, I guess you can go with a crazy green idea to these people and they can give you money from the beginning. So yeah, that's 3 or 4 ways. Hopefully that's useful.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi.
Hi, Mia.
That was great, thank you. It's really interesting about the example you give about angel funds or crowdfunding, because I'm a UK ambassador for GeoShip, which is it's about regenerative homes with bioceramic geodesic domes. And it's an American company, it's a startup like 3 years ago. And they've actually secured £10 million in the last 3 years through crowdfunding and angel investors. And it's quite fascinating how and it's a non-profit though, because if you invest into the company, so you become the shareholder. It's not that typical shareholder business. But I think it's possible, and I think that if you've got people who want to invest in your value of what you're trying to do, they'll come on board. And I think we have to look at alternative ways. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would say crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo can be quite powerful. So yeah, I had a friend, not green product, but he had this headphone concept. He got £1.5 million on Kickstarter. And that's about 10 years ago now. I got £10,000 on Kickstarter for a PTFE-free spray lubricant, and then did another Kickstarter actually with my friend Yuli there, and that didn't work out. So crowdfunding was the place to go in the beginning for new green products. But yeah, GeoShip's getting £10 million. That's amazing. Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much for the talk. I think like a lot of the young people that I speak to, one thing that we really struggle with is how can we go to these same people that cause the issues. You look at Shell being a major investor in renewable energy now. You look at you talk about Elon Musk. How can we go to the same people that cause a lot of these issues to get some solutions? And so I'm curious how your organization is navigating that, is staying true to principles, and not just, I guess, advancing interests of people that really have been at the forefront of advancing the climate crisis?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess companies like Shell, I mean, lots of renewable energy companies are not run by Shell, for example, but I guess it's important to remember that even companies, they're run by human beings. Those human beings change, and hopefully even the worst ones aren't complete psychopaths. I mean, after World War II, we didn't kind of just shoot all the Germans, we hopefully turned them into better people, and from being actual Nazis, right? So I guess even with like Shell, it's hopefully a redeemable company, and then I guess the trust point comes in as like, so if you're an investor in British Petroleum, BP, so they said they were going to invest a lot in renewables, they did a big advertising campaign around it, and then they changed CEO, the former CEO was set up in a scandal, he was kicked out, and a new guy came in and cut all of the renewable stuff. So I guess if you're an investor, you should be going to shareholder meetings and saying you need to invest in renewables and make a fuss about it. And if you're looking for a green investment, then don't invest in BP and really look at what they're investing in. I suppose the question, I guess if you're suggesting kind of getting rid of all of these institutions and companies, I guess on the flip side, we have benefited from fossil fuels and things. So to kind of get rid of Shell overnight or something would be, you know, I guess we have fuel ambulances and things with petrol. So I guess it is about transition. And a lot of the people, sort of like not the far right, but these kind of ultra-capitalist kind of American people, they genuinely believe that free market and burning fossil fuels creates a better world. They really believe that. So they're not necessarily bad people, they're just extremely misguided. So I think that's an important thing to remember. Have you ever seen the movie called The Corporation before? Yeah, and there's a great scene with the CEO of Shell. They, as you probably know, there's a guy called Ken Saro-Wiwa in Nigeria. He protested against Shell polluting the land in Nigeria. They caused a lot of problems there, and a lot of the money didn't go to the people in Nigeria. It's like a resource burden. The place was really polluted by Shell's activities. And there's a protest on the CEO of Shell's garden, and he sort of, in the corporation, he sort of says he doesn't really know like what was going on. He wasn't really aware about it. Which may have been the case. He seemed like kind of a nice guy, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think Shell really cleaned up their act, to be honest. But he did seem like a normal human being who did care, and he sort of said, "Well, it's difficult as CEO, especially of just the UK region. What can I do about it?" And the truth is, they should have done more. I'm not sure where I'm going with this answer, but essentially, yeah, hopefully everyone's redeemable, and it does just take pressure. And I think a lot of people, I mean, how many people that are sitting in their car with the engine running, a lot of them just don't really think about it. A lot of them, they're just a bit thick, to be honest. 50% of people are below average intelligence. That's statistically true. And you can be pretty dumb and still own a car in the UK. So when someone's sitting in their car with the engine running, they just require a bit of education and waking up. And I think the same would apply to the CEOs of companies like Shell. You're welcome.
More questions? Yeah, go on.
How many people here run a B Corp? Wow. The answer to your question, sir, is that the current business model is designed to extract resources and focus and concentrate wealth at the top. So Musk and all the other people, right? That's what it's designed to do. It's very good at it, and it cannot do anything else. What I hear you asking is there an alternative? And there is. It's B Corps. B Corps are companies that are set up on principle to protect and enhance the environment, to protect and enhance society, and make profit. And it's risen in the last 20, 30 years. So if we see the signs of B Corp, they're not absolutely perfect, but they're companies where the founders have said, we are not going to trash the planet, we are not going to diminish other human beings, and we want to run a good business. There's about 3,000 or 4,000 companies in Britain, there's about 20,000 companies worldwide. Those people are trying to do and offer people like yourself products that you can be reasonably sure about have been done. I'm surprised you're not people because you're behaving like one.
Yeah.
You do. Up the system and make it work for us and the planet and future generations. But they had to get over the Companies Act 2006, which says the responsibility of the director is to produce shareholder profit. That's what Shell management will not budge from. They could become a B Corp, they choose not to. Look for the people, it's your generation that are choosing to do this. It's all run by young people under 13 and 40s. And there's a whole tranche of venture capitalists now realising this is a growing market and they want to invest in those companies on the purpose of those organisations rather than the profit motive. So there's a huge shift happening and it's your generations that are actually driving this and they're not asking permission.
I have a question to you, if you know, because I know what a B Corp is, but I'm not sure how a brand, a corporation can become a B Corp.
It's very simple and extremely difficult. The organisation in Britain that represents it is called B Lab UK. They've been going about 15 years or so. To become a B Corp, you have to go through a 200 questionnaire that asks you, what are your environmental credentials, what do you do for people, what do you do for your supply chains, but not just what you do, where's the evidence of what you do? Believe me, no company gets more than 80 points. It's designed not to. So it's not a judgment what they're doing and then say, okay, you've scored 80, but your 80 is different from him. So why don't you two guys get together and you share the things that you're doing well with him, and he shares the things he's doing well with you, so that you both get up to 90 and 100. It's a collaborative business model as opposed to competitive. The idea is companies help each other to be better at protecting the planet and people. So it does cost money. It by no means a perfect system, but it's the only system out there now that's actually designed as an alternative to the current business as usual model. And over years, what happens is you gradually start sharing the best practice, because as I say, there's no competition to save the planet. There is a competition to sell stuff. I might make better hats than you make. We'll compete with on the market, but how we make them, I can learn from you and you can learn from me. Totally different business model. And it's now...
Get to some sort of percentage or...
No, as soon as you apply and you pay your money, it does cost money based on your revenue. As long as you get past the first assessment, let's say you get the 80, and it could be for one person company up to the size of Unilever. Unilever was thinking going that way, but hasn't because of change of management. But you have to achieve a basic minimum. But if you fail, you're not ejected. People work with you, and a whole team of consultants called B leaders who will help you not to fail, to change your system, change the way the company works, change the way you report data, change the way you publicise it, because everything has to be transparent. Everything you do has to be publicly scrutinisable. And sunlight is a very good detoxing agent. So it's just a way of saying that we know you're pretty shit at the moment, but we know you want to be better. We're going to help you on that journey. And it started here about 15 years ago, with one or two companies, and it's just taken off. So that's the way now that we can create, as I said, this idea. We've got to create the alternative system to replace the failing system. And the best alternative system is B Corps. You might hear them called purpose-led companies or social enterprises. They're all very similar. But so look for the B Corp label when you're buying, and just buy from them. Don't buy from companies that aren't B Corp. Support the people that are trying to do well. And it's happening. So I share Simon's optimism. I don't have any optimism or hope any longer. I know you guys are going to do it. There's far too many of you doing it, and the politicians will follow you, because that's what they are. You are the leaders. They want your vote. Business people want your money. You lay down the criteria on which you buy from them and when you vote with them. They will follow you. So the power is here.
And that happens, all these politicians, they go to Davos and these kind of events, and look at the smoking ban over 10 years ago now. That it's not an accident, that was kind of an international thing, we're banning smoking in our countries, everyone's getting cancer and it's costing the NHS. Then the president of Germany goes, that is a good idea, and then the idea spreads. And the same with like local air pollution laws as well. So starts like grassroots with scientists, and then NGOs and books write about it. Ethical consumers who are very rich, and then the majority kind consumer, and then it becomes law, then it becomes international law. So hopefully we're all much more optimistic. I am.
Thank you, Simon. So very interesting. We all need we all need to be more optimistic,
Yeah.
especially in the moment.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.